Welcome to Layout Teardown, where Ben and Brock explore the websites of the biggest publishers to unravel their ad layout strategies and their programmatic advertising techniques. In this episode, we're taking a look at Zillow.com.
Hey, and welcome to episode 4 of Layout Teardown, where we go through some of the layouts and ad strategies of some of the biggest websites globally. I am Ben.
I'm Brock.
And today we're going to bring you through Zillow, which is the largest property marketplace in the US. They are a mega publisher, I think one of the top 20 globally. And we're going to bring you through the strategy that they will use for advertising, why that's different to a kind of standard publisher and where they see that revenue stream sitting, and what we would do differently too. So Zillow was founded back in 2006, quickly became the biggest property marketplace in the US. Today, they sit just behind Reddit with in the kind of top publishers globally, getting about 105 million unique visitors every year. They are 3 times bigger than their next competitors in market. So really a beast of a business that's been going for a very long time. From what we can see in their investor deck, programmatic advertising is only 2% of total revenue. So this is definitely going to change how they run their advertising strategy, what we need to look at, and what we need to take into account. Brock, what do you think is going to be different for them versus your standard kind of big publisher?
Yeah, I think the major piece for them is really going to be the impact ads have on the rest of their business. So if you look at the pie chart there, we can see that the traditional buying, selling a property is going to dwarf and continues to dwarf everything else on that chart. But of course, you have to consider cases where a highly engaging ad might drag someone away from the website, and therefore they don't go through for a tour or apply for a contract or other functions that the website provides. On the other hand, however, we would definitely be looking at ways that we can leverage their massive reach to build up a engaged audience, to get logins, particularly now as cookies start to decline, and really drive the revenue through all channels because of their huge presence in this market.
Yeah, one of the things that makes Zillow interesting is it's free to put a listing on the site. So a lot of property marketplaces charge quite a bit for that. And they've definitely diversified all the different revenue streams that they have. Even still though, yeah, programmatic advertising will be seen as a nice to have that's adding some value. So in our jobs is to make sure it's not impacting anything in the business widely, and that it can actually maybe facilitate some of the other areas of the business in different ways to drive more outcomes and generate more revenue.
Yeah, to add to that, if you look at the second smallest section of the pie chart, the mortgage being 5%, I'm guessing is a new area of business for them. One easy approach might be to leverage the aforementioned logged in data, as assuming that they have it, and really start to use segments of users across Zillow to be pitching them through advertising or otherwise mortgage products.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so we're going to jump into the layout. For really any marketplace, you've really got 2 core parts of the website. You've got search, which generally is about 70% of traffic, and then you've got the details page, which is where you go and look into the photos, get some more information on what you're going to buy, which generally is about 30% of traffic. So we're going to go through those in order, look at them on both desktop and mobile. We're going to give you our opinions on it from how it is today, what we might change conservatively, and let's say best case, we got to do what we wanted. What would we do to really drive outcomes from a programmatic standpoint? So we are jumping into the layout. Before we do that, we're going to have a look at some of the data that we have access to. Now, we haven't spoken with Zillow. We don't have too much insider information. So a lot of this is just stuff we're grabbing from the investor deck and from SimilarWeb, Chrome extension we use here. Within the investor deck, we can see that they're getting about 100 million unique users that are in there. So really chunky in terms of traffic. Looking into Similar web, we can see most of this is all in the US, as we'd expect. Generally, these kind of sites are pretty localized to where the property is, which makes a lot of sense. In terms of where the traffic is coming from, then it's about 60% coming from direct and 40% coming from search. What would that tell you normally, Brock? What are you kind of getting from that?
I'm thinking engaged users, and I'm thinking a brand that is well known in the market. The overwhelming / better than search direct number makes me think people are going to Zillow, because Zillow is the brand that gives them what they want, and that'll be buying houses, or like me, look at all the photos of all the expensive houses.
Yes, definitely. And we can see that in the deck. They're 3 times, bigger in terms of traffic than their competitors. People know Zillow. They're coming here to look at the properties that they're interested in. So if we're then to jump into our search page, we're going to do this on desktop first. So Zillow have gone for a slightly different first kind of version that you get to on their desktop site. We've got the map in full view. So a lot of other property sites like Rightmove, Realtor, REA in Australia will all generally do the list. You can move to a map, but they've gone straight for the map, which is quite interesting. And then we've got our listings on the side. We can see that we've got some version of programmatic running. So we've got 6 partners running in the auction. We saw on ads.txt, it was pretty thin, but we can see that they've definitely got some kind of programmatic advertising running. Ads are serving through Google Ad Manager, as you would expect. So we've got a little bit here to work with and to look at. Passing over to you, Brock, what are you seeing? What does it look like from a first go?
Yeah, I see personification of the investor deck. There isn't thousands and thousands of requests flying out to all ad tech vendors in the ecosystem. We're looking at the ads.txt file being only sort of 10 or 15 rows long. It looks like it's all server-side / built in-house, so they're keeping it quite simple. I imagine fairly conservative in the way that they're rolling out these changes, because 98% of their revenue is not ads. So this is a very standard approach, I would say, for a business in their position.
Yeah. One other key piece to note is even within that kind of programmatic advertising piece, there'll be parts that are carved out for open auction, which is your straight auction that we have, and they'll have quite a lot of deals in there as well that they're setting up with advertisers, agencies, realtors, etc. They also have their own self-service platform where you can go in and set up campaigns and deals. So they've really tried to kind of scope that out where it's self-serve. You can get it set up yourselves without too much effort on their side. So actually looking for some ads on the page then, as we start to scroll, we can see that we've got ads loading in straight away. Generally, from what we can see, they're fairly hidden, or I would say pushed down to the very bottom of the page. What do you think the performance is going to be? Thoughts on that from a kind of a first go?
Yeah, there are a few things with this position. I think the good is putting it near pagination.
Yeah.
So you can see here we're on the first page of this search listing. Usually putting ads around areas where people are is going to help you from a viewability and interaction metric point of view. The bit that I'm not liking as much is how far it is down the page, but I am definitely biased. Considering the state of where they are from a programmatic growth point of view, this is totally normal. I would not expect to see anything really different.
Yeah.
What I have noticed though is when you play around with the map, as you do so, the page starts to recalculate, and you can kind of see it there on the screen that we haven't actually added much in terms of rich information about the properties at this point.
Yeah.
And we've made extra requests, and or we're reloading a unit over and over and over again. So my expectation, because they've gone map first, a user is very likely going to make 2, 3, 4, 5 zooms or drags and reinitialization of that sidebar.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that they might have a fair bit of wastage in terms of requests.
Right.
Now, if that is really a concern, that is to be seen, because I believe they've also added some sort of on-scroll loading capability just to sort of ease the tension a little bit from a metrics point of view.
Yeah.
High floor, And that makes complete sense. So
Yeah.
what I'd like to see is one of two things. One is, can we get the ad in a more into a position that is more likely to be interacted with? Now that is a huge ask considering what they're trying to do here and sell, multi-million-dollar properties. So A/B testing, running it in a structured way is very, very important. That's why pushing the logged in strategy as well is very important, because you can very easily find out, okay, here's my segment of users that are logged in, they show propensity to buy. I probably don't want to block them in any way or distract them with advertising. Whereas across 100 million uniques, I believe you said,
Yeah.
there must be at least 1 million, I dare say a lot more than that are there just to look at the properties or to initially scope out where they might buy.
Yep.
A perfect audience to start trying to get a bit of extra cash out of through programmatic.
Right. So I guess the key takeaways there were we've got an ad loading in at the bottom. Generally, we're not seeing a huge amount of lazy loading, so performance probably isn't amazing on your kind of key viewability CTR metrics, which you need someone to see the ad for. As we move the map around, we're getting a refresh, but that ad unit is still there, so that could be also kind of impacting the general performance that we've got. You generally want to move that ad somewhere that's in a better location, but we're going to target specific segments of audiences.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to do it.
Yeah.
The other way is, do we actually need to refresh the ad unit when we make these micro adjustments to the map?
Right.
So it looks very PWA, SPA style from implementation.
Which is?
Single page app or progressive web app.
Yeah.
I haven't dug in enough to tell you exactly the answer, but the way to tell that it is one or the other is we're interacting with the map, we're loading alternative content without refreshing the whole page.
Right.
So the right-hand side list is being recycled. Looks like that list widget is recycling the ad itself. Does it need to do that? Maybe not. Of course, you'd take a hit on volume if you do it that way.
Yeah.
But the question is, what kind of interaction are you getting? Are we sending requests out to the void?
Yep.
Can we improve on other metrics by doing it that way?
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting point about deciding who we're going to show different ad strategies to as well. So we've talked to a few different online marketplaces recently, and kind of what Brock described is pretty common in that you've got a smaller group that are highly engaged and ready to purchase. So whether that's rent a new property, buy a house, and then you've got actually a fairly significant amount of users that are browsing and just kind of looking around, and that's what they do on the weekends. I definitely look at other rentals on the weekends. So targeting them differently makes sense because they're less likely to generate revenue on other parts of the business. So we can monetize them from a programmatic standpoint. So if you've got your CDP or DMP, which is customer data platform, set up with these segments in it, we can basically pick up those kind of, interactions with the page, and we can show a different ad strategy to those different users to, customize it, make sure it fits with the wider business model and generates revenue too. Okay, let's click an ad or a property. So clicking in here is effectively their details section. Again, this screams SPA because we're not really loading in a new page here. To get an ad unit, then we've got to scroll down again quite a bit to get to a unit at the bottom here, and then I think there's two in a row. Yeah, so there's a double 300 by 250s on top of each other there. What's your first thoughts here?
I think it's similar.
Yeah.
We're trying not, we being Zillow, we're trying not to bombard users with ads in the key areas. I think it's a lot more understandable at this point in the journey. There is implied interest in the property. The question really for me would be, how often is a user going through and looking at photos relative to actually going through and making any other kind of interaction, be it requesting a contract or requesting a property tour or whatever that they'd be interested in.
Yeah.
So if you were to go through and look at the images, we now have this big screen view. This is where the user data becomes really interesting, because now
Yeah.
our opportunity to monetize from an advertising point of view has decreased significantly. You know,
Right.
you could very easily shift the size of these images, you know, deal with the pagination problem and
Yeah.
put a unit in there.
Right. So we'd have basically we could, based on the user type, let's say unlikely to buy this $10 million house,
Most of us.
we could have a billboard or a skyscraper in the side there and generate some pretty good revenue.
Yeah, commonly, it's a vertical unit, so
Right.
the 300 by 600.
Yeah.
It also opens up the opportunity for things like lead capture forms, you know, native products that, you know, might be geo-targeted as well. There's rich information on this page, even if it is inferred.
Yeah.
And that, I believe, will give them a few extra strings in their bow when going to market for setting up new advertising products.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Any other pieces that you would go to if you could do anything here?
If I could do anything,
Yeah.
I think having something that is visible on this screen is probably the biggest way that you're going to change the game there.
Yeah.
It is a seismic change.
Yeah.
Let's not beat around the bush. But when looking at some of the other competitors on the market, they very commonly have sort of above everything leaderboards.
Right.
Alternatively, if you don't mind scrolling through the feed,
Yeah.
you could use those positions as native, as regular display, as even leaderboards as well. Now, if you can zoom into, say, New York or something, and we'll get some more properties. Because one thing that I did notice while you do that is we've got the 300 by 250 at the bottom of the page. It only accepts the 300 by 250. Ben's on a fairly normal laptop screen. Some of us, you know, when we pretend to work, look on our big screens at the office. You definitely would be able to fit a 728 by 90 in there, even in the same position. So
yes,
if you were to ask me the opposite question, you know, if I couldn't change anything,
right,
but I had the space to work with, I think the easiest thing to do would be to make that unit multi-size.
Got it. Yeah. So we would have multiple positions other than 300 by 250 could fill here.
Yeah, and you can see that they've kind of done this in other positions on the site, right?
Yeah.
So we saw the double 300 by 250 on the property details page.
Yep.
You could even do that. It's a much easier sell because the rest of the business is used to it.
Yeah.
But if you can fit a 728 by 90, you could probably do both.
Yeah, which I think we would just about. We've got a bit of space to go. So yeah, that would be a nice optimization.
GPT or otherwise lets you manage the size maps very, very easily. So this is a pretty simple implementation problem.
It's an easy win.
It really just depends on what we want from a consumer-facing point of view.
Yeah. My best case would be we'd put a 728 by 90 on the map so it's in view permanently. I'm pretty sure there's a pretty long visit duration on site. We'd get quite a lot out of it. I'm sure a lot of product managers in Zillow would die before that ever happened, but yeah, few options there. Okay, let's cut to mobile. Okay, so we are now going to look through the mobile layout. So we'll start off with search and then move into details. Our guess is this will be about, or at least 50% of traffic, and generally it's a little bit harder to monetize both from a programmatic perspective, but also just generally from an advertising standpoint. Ad units are a little bit smaller, a little bit harder to get, you know, viewability and CTR. It's, you know, smaller screen. The first thing that I can see is a push towards downloading their app. Brock, why do you think that's there?
Yeah, I generally think this is very common practice in the industry. We're trying to move users into a much more rich experience where the engineers that are building the native product itself are able to ship, you know, cool, fancy map features, gallery features, all those kind of things. You know, it's endemic to Android and iOS. You can build customization around each. And I also would say that they're more likely to get a login. You know, it's fairly common that you download any app, be it real estate or otherwise, and you're presented with, particularly on iOS, you'll get iOS 14 and you get app location data and all the various things you quickly click yes to,
Yeah.
again, you'll be able to get a login, and that'll be much like very, very important, paramount to their strategy for building up their logged in audience.
Yeah, generally that's a pretty big metric that a lot of these big publishers will track is logged in versus logged out user growth. Logged in users are generally more valuable, and as cookies deprecate, we want to be able to target users on first party data and generally build products for them in a good way. So that makes a lot of sense. In terms of the layout, so they have gone for the list view this time versus starting off with the map. So a bit of a change. My guess is this is just, it's a little bit easier to use a list on mobile versus desktop.
Yeah, I would have thought so. You also get into scroll mentality.
Yeah.
You just keep on scrolling, look at more images. It's probably some predictor for interaction.
Right.
Whereas on the other hand, perhaps map technology on an iPhone or an Android is probably not amazing.
Yeah.
You've got pinch and click, particularly for those that are not used to it and have just coming online or have always used a computer or an iPad. The list seems more accessible for a mobile user, I would say.
Yeah, agreed. From an ad perspective, we've seen what looks like two combinations. So one is a 300 by 250 down the very bottom of the page. Generally, it looks like it's lazy loaded a little bit from the top and then it's loaded in. Or we see two sponsored units coming in that are kind of a native style that are coming in that look like the property in there. What's your take so far on this setup? What would you do differently?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense straight out of the gate. Like, we've got a premium position relative to other listings. I believe it's sort of third or fourth. It's marked as sponsored. It looks like the content. One thing to test would be like how it responds on a horizontal mobile or on an iPad layout. When I think about the 100 million users, there has to be a significant amount that are viewing this site or even this list across regular mobile, so vertical, horizontal, then you've got your iPad users and you move them to your desktop. So right here is what I would call like a vertical native design where you have image on top and call to action beneath.
Yep.
Generally what we see is as your screen gets wider, you get a much more distorted picture, or you compensate in ratios and have a really tall image, which is probably not what they're trying to achieve. You can probably test it by dragging along your responsive bar.
Yeah.
Because one thing, okay, they've managed it well.
Yeah.
One thing they could do is look to use horizontal native, and that's where you can move into spaces like a leaderboard through multi-size, and or rely on Google Ad Manager, the ad server, to serve up these nice developer creatives or whoever they're selling to ahead of something programmatic and horizontal. Yeah, going to double this view is a perfect way to manage it.
Yeah, nice. If you were to add to this, adjust to this, what are you recommending if you are in the room with the Zillow team?
Yeah, I think particularly if you have a way to if they have a way to track it moreover is someone goes and closes the app download button. If you want to have a go, it's gone. There's space there that's already being used that users are used to. You're able to supplement that with a fancy direct position like what they have in these in-content units, or even just something sticky with a high floor price like that. That's a very low impact way relative to the rest of the site. We're talking that the ratio of content to ads, a 320 by 50 or something, will be an earner just on pure volume.
Yeah.
Always in view, sellable. If you want to go direct, you probably would go that way because of the map and sort buttons that you have down the bottom.
Yeah.
That's like
be harder to put it down the bottom.
Yeah, it's fairly paramount.
Yeah.
One thing that you would have to manage are the filters at top. So right now, as you scroll, you've got consistent user UX elements at the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
So one thing you might have to do is add space or use a format that makes sense, that isn't going to be accidentally clicked and send your click spam scores to the moon.
Yeah.
The second part is what we're doing in content. So native first makes a lot of sense. I would imagine that they've got mortgage brands, finance, insurance brands, like all of those kind of guys that'll be itching for that kind of content. One thing they could do, and they might do this, I haven't seen it, is use those native positions as sort of multi-format positions. So, have a nice sort of in-feed video rather. That might be a way to break into the video space, considering real estate video on mobile is probably a bit of a harder sell. So they'd still maintain their nice sort of image up top, buttons down bottom, call to action style, but run a video player and maybe a taller unit altogether, like an Outstream style player.
So we're still getting that native feel. We're not breaking the UX, but we're getting in different inventory that we can monetize in the same space effectively.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's more options, more products for their teams to go to market with. That being said, you're always going to be able to backfill with programmatic. And at a very high floor with pretty well defined block lists and allow lists if that's better for the Zillow team. They could really keep those units as a premium buy and then increase their volume by adding in more products into the same position.
Yeah, definitely. Opening up then the details section, the first thing we notice is there is no ads. So this is something that often happens in kind of online marketplaces. Details is the kind of, you've now got the user through the funnel a bit. They're definitely more interested. They are reading the details, and generally the agents and dealers and sellers are very conscious of any advertising being here, taking away from their opportunity to generate leads and to get what they pay for when they come to Zillow. Zillow is free, but most of their revenue is coming from kind of the paid versions. So getting ads in here is not super easy. We've done it with some online marketplaces, but you really need to show that there is no impact to that funnel and through the leads coming through to the buyers. So that's the key thing that we're looking for. So with any of the changes really that we'd be making with Zillow, the recommendation from us is always to A/B test it, run it on 1% of traffic. And really, we want to see, does it impact revenue? But really what we want to see is what's the impact on the wider business? Are we still getting our leads through the funnel? Are they still making it to the details page? And then are they still clicking that apply button? Anything you'd add, or where you would be placing ads to run those kind of 1% tests?
Yeah, this one's particularly interesting because on desktop details, we saw before, they had the most ads.
Right, yeah.
In terms of density.
The two on top of each other.
That's right.
Yeah.
The two on the sidebar. When I was looking at Zillow before, on my large screen, they had two side by side as well.
Right.
Again, right at the bottom.
Yeah.
So this infers that
there's appetite.
Well, there's appetite specifically on desktop for it.
Yeah.
But like mobile web, do we have less of a conversion, perhaps?
Yeah.
Are people just moving through the app, and that's the goal?
Yeah.
That also might be the case.
Yeah.
So if mobile web is just a springboard to run on app, then maybe the approach is just push more app download banners and then use positions that would go to programmatic or to native for pushing people to download the app. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
Second part really is going to be getting units in where people are.
Right.
I think above the fold will be very tough in this case.
Yeah.
Although going into the gallery would be the easiest way, again, similar to desktop. You've got scrollable content. You're able to utilize fairly standard sizes. In this case, it's squares. So 300 by 250 will work perfectly.
Yeah.
Or a native lead capture form as well.
Yeah.
You can kind of see there at the bottom that they're attempting something like that.
Right.
The real question will be, could we A/B test ad against a different kind of sort of third party, or sign up for a quote on electricity or something, direct placement versus what they have now.
Yep.
And then again, as you scroll through, you can see we've got Google Maps sections, we've got scoring. Like basically what we want to be doing is figuring out, you can use things like heat map tools, and there's plenty of things out there that they could use to really understand where the attention is on this page. And that's where you want to start A/B testing. Even if it's in small, like very small ads, small scale testing, small percentages, at 100 million uniques, like that makes a big difference.
Okay, so to recap, Zillow has a lot going on. There's a range of different business models, and they're trying to diversify as much as possible. Ads is a part of that, but it's very small. So any changes that we're going to be doing need to be brought in with a mind to the larger ecosystem that is Zillow, and measuring on small fractions of traffic and measuring the impact that has to those different funnels.
The thing we did notice was a little bit of inconsistency through desktop and mobile. They've got a nice, fancy, interactive map. What happens is all the ads are pushed to the bottom. There are many ways that we can make this better. One thing might be optimizing the position they're in. The other thing might be optimizing when they're loaded and how they're loaded.
Yeah, and we looked at breaking out the advertising strategies based on segments as well. So lots of users will be in market to find a new rental or a new home, but lots of the users will just be browsing. And so we want to show different strategies to these different users. So by picking up signals from the CDP or DMP, we can adjust what we load, the layout, the ad stack, to allow us to monetize those different user groups in different ways.
The app looks like a big thing, particularly for mobile, obviously for mobile, and continuing to push that stream makes a lot of sense, even if it is at the expense of serving more ads.
So yeah, lots of room to grow, and doing that in a safe way that doesn't impact their wider business, but definitely some good opportunities there to increase yield, increase the inventory that they've got, and drive a bit more revenue. Okay, so that's episode 4 of Layout Teardown.
If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like, leave a comment if you learned something, subscribe, it helps us all out here.
And any publishers out there that would like us to tear down their layout, please do reach out, and we'll leave a link below for you to do that. Thank you.